All right, let's dive in. A massive shift is coming to the corporate world in Singapore. Starting in 2025, a whole new set of climate reporting rules will begin to roll out, and they're going to affect thousands of companies. So in this explainer, we're going to break down exactly what you, as a business leader, really need to know. But before we get into the nuts and bolts, let's talk about why this is such a big deal. I want to be clear. This is not just about compliance or more paperwork. The regulators themselves are pointing out that companies who get on top of this, who can prove their climate credentials with clear reporting, are setting themselves up for some real advantages. We're talking new markets, new customers, better access to financing. This is about opportunity. So why now? What's the rush? Well, this move isn't happening in a vacuum. It's actually part of a huge global trend toward more business transparency, and it ties directly into Singapore's own national strategy for a sustainable future. And this really gets to the heart of it. There are two big goals here. On one hand, it's about making sure Singapore stays competitive, a go-to hub for global business. On the other, it's about pushing forward with the Singapore Green Plan 2030. The core idea is that in today's world, you can't have one without the other. They're basically the same goal. Okay, let's get practical. I'm sure the first question on your mind is, does this actually apply to my company? Well, the rules are being rolled out across two main groups. So, the new regulations are going to cover all companies listed on the Singapore Exchange. That's the SGX, and also a specific group of large non-listed companies, the ones that fall under ACRA. So yeah, it's a wide net, capturing both public and major private businesses. Let's look at the nitty-gritty. For the listed companies, it's basically a tiered system. You've got everyone from the big players on the Straits Times Index all the way down to smaller firms. Now, for the non-listed companies, the line is super clear. You're considered large if your annual revenue hits at least $1 billion, and you have at least $500 million in total assets. And remember, it's not one or the other. You have to meet both of those conditions. So we know who needs to report. The next big question is, what exactly do they need to report? To understand that, you've got to get familiar with two key acronyms, ISSB and GHG. First up, we have ISSB. The easiest way to think about this is that it's the new global language for climate reporting. It's a whole set of standards that basically requires companies to explain how they're thinking about and dealing with climate-related risks and opportunities. And it's not just about crunching numbers. It's about telling the story of your strategy, your governance, and how you manage risk. The second piece of the puzzle is reporting your greenhouse gas or GHG emissions. This is broken down into what they call scopes. Scope 1 is pretty straightforward. It's the direct emissions from things you actually own or control, like your company's vehicles or factory furnaces. Scope 2 is for the energy you buy, mostly electricity. And then there's Scope 3, which for now is just for the biggest listed companies. This one's the biggie. It covers all the other indirect emissions from your entire value chain, from suppliers to customers. Okay, now for the main event, the timeline. This is the official roadmap. It lays out all the key dates and deadlines from 2025 all the way to 2032. Honestly, this is probably the most critical slide for your planning. Let's walk through this, shall we? It all kicks off in financial year 2025. That's when all listed companies have to start reporting their Scope 1 and 2 emissions. A year later, in 2026, the large non-listed companies jump in and do the same. From there, things really start to ramp up. By 2028, the bigger listed firms need to deliver the full ISSB report. Then, 2029, this is a huge step. All listed companies will need to get external assurance. Think of it as an audit for their emissions data. The requirements keep cascading, and by 2032, those large non-listed companies will also need that external sign-off. Which brings us perfectly to the fine print, because this isn't just about handing in a report and hoping for the best. A crucial part of this whole plan is verification. So let's take a look at who can actually do these audits and if there are any loopholes. The rules are actually quite specific about who can perform these mandatory checks. The job can be done by audit firms that are already registered with ACRA, no surprise there, or by specialized testing, inspection, and certification firms, as long as they're accredited by the Singapore Accreditation Council. So with all these new regulations, the question that's probably buzzing in the minds of a lot of execs, especially at subsidiary companies, is a simple one. Is there a way out of this? Is there any kind of exemption? And the answer is yes, there is. But, and this is a really big but, it's only for a very specific scenario. A large non-listed company can get an exemption, but only if its parent company is already publishing a climate report that uses standards equivalent to the ISSB. And here's the kicker. That parent company's report has to explicitly include the subsidiary's activities, and it must be publicly available. So no, you can't just hide inside a private parent company report. So when you look at all the details, the timeline, the rules, the fine print, the message is absolutely unmistakable. For a massive chunk of Singapore's business landscape, climate transparency is officially moving from a nice-to-have to a must-do. The era of it being optional? Yeah, that's coming to an end. So ultimately, as business leaders look at this whole roadmap, they really face a fundamental choice. Do you see this as just another mandatory cost of doing business? Or do you see it as a ticket to future growth, a chance to build a more resilient, more competitive company for the decades ahead? How you answer that question will likely define the winners and losers in this new era.